How did the Cold War drive Soviet military spending? Have you ever wondered how the Cold War shaped the military spending of the Soviet Union? Let's break it down. The Cold War was a time of intense rivalry between the Soviet Union and the United States. This competition pushed the Soviet leadership to prioritize military strength. They believed that a strong military was essential for maintaining their influence and countering threats from the United States and NATO allies. From the early stages of the Cold War, military spending in the Soviet Union was already on the rise. By the early 1970s, this trend continued to grow. The arms race intensified, especially during the Reagan administration. Initiatives like the Strategic Defense Initiative put additional pressure on the Soviet Union to increase its defense budget. This was not just a reaction to specific policies from the United States. It was a long-term strategy deeply embedded in Soviet planning. Soviet military spending consumed a large portion of the national economy, estimated between 10 and 20% of gross domestic product. This high level of spending persisted even during times when the economy was struggling. It showed that defense was prioritized over civilian needs. The military-industrial complex received more funding and resources, often at the expense of sectors that could have improved the economy or produced consumer goods. The centralized planning of the Soviet economic system made it hard to track military expenditures accurately. However, it is clear that the Soviet Union was willing to sacrifice growth in civilian sectors to sustain its military capabilities. This choice reflected the belief that defense was vital for the survival of socialism against capitalist adversaries. The Cold War military spending led to technological advancements in defense, but also diverted resources away from civilian industries. This imbalance created economic inefficiencies and hardships within the Soviet Union. Ultimately, it contributed to the weakening and eventual collapse of the Soviet state. In practical terms, the Cold War meant that the Soviet Union maintained a large standing army. They invested heavily in nuclear and conventional weapons and prioritized military research. This focus on military spending affected the daily lives of Soviet citizens. Resources were allocated more toward armaments than consumer goods or infrastructure. The perception of a constant external threat justified high defense budgets. This spending continued even during economic downturns, reflecting the socialist state's focus on survival and competition with capitalism. However, this emphasis on military buildup came at a cost. It hindered civilian economic growth and contributed to systemic challenges within the Soviet Union.